could not be more thrilled today than to introduce to you someone whose work I have been following and kind of stalking and creeping on for about a year now. And I learned about charitable gifting of real estate at a seminar about 14 months ago. With my history in real estate and helping nonprofits, the light bulb went off and said, ding, ding, ding. We can help nonprofits. I found a 501c3 to partner with. And here we are 14 months later, certifying real estate agents as charitable real estate specialists to help us spread the word about what's going on. There's an awakening. And Dr. Russell James has been a consummate researcher, learning anything and everything about all non-cash assets. Specifically today, we're going to talk about real estate. Dr. James, please feel free to introduce yourself in any way that I have not done you justice, and let's jump right in.
No, that's fine. I'm Russell. I'm a professor at Texas Tech University, where I teach graduate courses in charitable financial planning.
Nice. And you have a ton of videos on YouTube, and you are constantly speaking to all kinds of nonprofits, financial service folks, and now real estate agents about the blessed gift of charitable, in this case, not real estate, all other kind of non-cash assets as well. Talk to me a little bit about, I'm curious, how did you get into this niche? What was it about this for you?
Well, so I guess I started out after I graduated from law school, and I went to work both in plan giving for a small college. Also had an estate planning practice as an attorney, and believe it or not, actually before that had interned at a real estate brokerage, and so that's always been part of my background. And actually, all of my research relates to decision making in gifts, estates, and property, which in the law is considered to be sort of one combined area. So this is very familiar ground for me. You know, after I did that for a number of years, about 6 years, decided the whole college professor thing was what I wanted to do. Went back and got my PhD from the University of Missouri. Dissertation was on charitable giving, and actually spent about 5.5 years as college president. So that was much more of a major gifts focused role. And since that time, really just been focused on research and teaching. And the research is all about decision making in gifts, estates, and property. So that's a bit of my background. I've been here teaching at Texas Tech University for a little over a decade, and that's what keeps me busy.
Well, I love how in your videos you talk about not only all of the numbers and the down and dirty boring part, as I would call it, but you also get into the psychology of the 4 S's, meaning tell people story, 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 shut up, and let them invite you to tell them more about this. You know, I'll just say exactly what our biggest issue is. We teach, we train, we inform nonprofits, property owners, real estate agents that they can all come together for a win-win-win. But the biggest bottleneck, the biggest question that stops people in their tracks is, sounds good, want to get big checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars, what do we do next? And then they just kind of pull back and disappear. What can we do to help them really step into this powerfully?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different approaches that I think are very useful, and no surprise, I'm going to start with that same idea of story. And what I mean by that is one of the most powerful things we can do whenever we're trying to talk with potential donors about complex transactions, such as gifts of real estate, is to simply share a story of someone like the donor, and you can be creative and come up with some way that the person in the example is like the person you're talking to, who has made a gift like the one that you're going to be talking about. It's really underlying this idea where we want to communicate that people like me do things like this, where the me is the person you're talking to. And so one of the great ways to do that is to simply share a story about someone else who made the gift, and very powerfully include in that the dramatic benefits that can come to the donor as well as the organization when the gifts are made with real estate or other appreciated assets. So you want to point out things like all of those capital gains taxes are completely avoided when we give the appreciated real estate rather than selling the real estate and writing a check later. So it's great to be able to lead with benefits. Now, you know, the other side is when you have a donor who is making these kinds of gifts, to be able to stop and ask. If a donor is making substantial cash gifts, to be able to stop and ask, just to check, do you perhaps have any appreciated assets that you might want to consider giving instead? And the reason I say that is because the benefits from giving those kinds of assets are much higher than simply giving cash. And perhaps that can lead to these kinds of conversations. Now, I point that out because a lot of nonprofits are frightened that the last thing they want to do if a donor sends in a check is to start talking about alternatives. But here's why it's dramatically important for the nonprofits to do that. And that is that once a donor makes a gift out of their assets, that is their non-cash wealth, it can be transformational for the donor's mindset. It makes that asset category donation relevant. And that actually has a big psychological effect on the donors, because before, if you're just asking for gifts of cash, well, I'm naturally going to compare that to other things I spend cash on, right? My other, what we might call disposable income expenditures, what I just spent at Starbucks. But if you start asking for gifts or giving example of gifts that come out of assets, well, my natural comparison point to that is my wealth, that is my non-cash assets. And that can be transformational for what size of gifts seems appropriate for the donors.
I love that. I was just watching one of your videos about how when you say compare, how, you know, if you say, well, Susie, you know, just like you, just donated a piece of real estate, and there was $150,000 that came to the nonprofit, and how actually giving that example as opposed to you can save on your capital gains. Susie didn't pay any capital gains, and she's just like you. It's just so fascinating. So when you talk about all of what you just said, there are so many nonprofits and real estate agents that we've talked to who, when given that advice, they are afraid that if they say that, they're going to get asked questions they can't answer. Are there any statistics, or what is the easiest way for the nonprofit or the real estate agent who will be talking to potential donors to really get past the fear of even bringing up something so foreign to them?
Oh, absolutely. So here's the key thing to keep in mind. If you are talking with a potential donor about these sort of transactions, you've got to have the right goal in mind. And the right goal is not to pass some imaginary multiple choice or final exam set of questions. In other words, there is this fear that, oh, I'm having a conversation. My goal has got to be to get everything answered immediately and to answer it right. No. Your goal is to get an agreement to present a detailed proposal. In other words, even if you know all the right answers, just boom, 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 here's all of the right answers, it's actually more powerful when you're working with the client to set up an opportunity to present the details of a transaction at the next meeting than it is to just quickly say, oh, this is the right answer, boom, boom, boom. The reason why is that, number one, if you set up the next meeting to present a formal proposal, it adds value, perceived value, to what you're bringing to the table. If it's just off the top of my head, here you go, answer, that's fine, but it doesn't feel like you're providing much value. On the other hand, if the response is something along the lines of, You know, your situation reminds me of another donor. She was actually able to save over $100,000 in capital gains taxes by making a gift like this. I'd love to talk with some other folks, put together some ideas for you to look at, and we could get together and go over those and just see if anything might be of interest to you. Is that something you would be interested in? And if so, then that gives you permission to ask for details of that would be helpful in putting the proposal together. Details about the real estate, about some of the background, maybe what it was purchased for, and what size of gift you would be looking at making, and maybe a time frame, those sort of details. And again, now you've justified asking those investigation questions because we're setting up the next meeting. And then if the question comes up, well, now what about my accelerated cost recovery tax issues with this property? Again, we're not trying to pass a final exam here. You're just going to say, that's a great question. Let me work on making sure I give you exactly not only the right answer, but the right range of options. So let me get all that information from you on those details so that I can put that together for our next meeting. That's the response that you want. So you're not trying to pass a final exam. You're trying to get the agreement for the next meeting at which you're going to present the detailed proposal. So that takes all of the stress out of it from the person who's presenting, because this isn't a final exam. You're not going to have to sort of pass it right away. Your goal is not to immediately give the right answer. Instead, your goal is to get the next meeting at which you'll present some of those detailed proposals. And if there's anything wonky about the transaction, you'll have time. Make a few phone calls, do a little bit of research so that the answers that you're giving are appropriate answers.
I'm so grateful to hear you say that and to get it on recording, because the way that we are doing things here at the Real Agents of Change, we've partnered with the 501c3, which is realtygiftfund.org, and they are in essence the 501c3 that will receive the donation. Then we immediately list the property with one of our Real Agents of Change at a full commission. And when it's liquidated, we give the checks to whoever the nonprofits are that the donor wanted them to go to. It's so simple to just say that, but so often people they want to be the expert. They want to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and know all the answers, but they don't need to know. And as a matter of fact, I'm very quick to tell people, look, I have no idea how any of the tax stuff works. That's what Realty Gift Fund is for. And that's what, bringing them into the conversation. So to your point, not only can they defer it to their team, we have a team to bring into the conversation to take all of that burden away.
Absolutely, and that's that's one of the reasons why this works so well. But there's another reason, which has to do with the psychology of the client or the donor. Not only does setting up that next meeting provide their perception of greater value that you're bringing, because this isn't just off the top of your head quick comments where you give the quick answer, even if it's the right answer. Not only is that a perception of greater value, but it actually will increase the donor's interest in making these kinds of gifts. And here's why. You see, if the donor knows I've got this meeting in, whatever it might be, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, they're going to be thinking about it over time. They're going to be thinking about that asset, the charitable goals that they have, the charitable impact that they want to make, and that period of time during which they're off and on thinking about this. Oh, I see that meeting on my calendar. Yeah, that's when we're going to talk about that. Gradually, they become more comfortable with the idea of making this gift out of wealth. So the longer we can sort of keep the donor in that frame of mind of we're in the land of wealth sharing, the more reasonable the gift, even a very large gift, starts to become. You can't do that in 15 seconds when you just, boom, give them the right tax answer and then, oh, that's interesting, then we move on. We need to set up that next meeting as much for the psychological reasons as for the tactical reasons that you don't want to have to come up with that immediate right answer. You want to involve the experts that you can connect with to have that more detailed, appropriate proposal.
Well, and to your point, with creating value, when that nonprofit fundraiser or that real estate agent or whomever it is that's having this conversation, when they say, you know, let me consult my team, let us come up with the best options for you, etc. It, to your point, as they're thinking about it, they're like, oh, wow, this nonprofit's different. They have a team. They want to look at what's best for me. Instead of this nonprofit just having their hand out asking me for cash, they're actually going to bring me alternative ways to leave legacy, alternative tax benefits. Wow, I'll bet the people at my Rotary Club would like to hear about this. I'll bet the other nonprofits that I like to give checks to would like to hear how this one has a team.
And Cammie, one of the things that's important about that is that it can transform the relationship between the fundraiser and the donor. Because now the fundraiser isn't just in the position of ask, ask, ask. Rather, the fundraiser becomes a bit of an advisor, somebody who has good ideas, who provides value, who provides benefits to the donor. And that change in a relationship can be transformational. You know, especially the first time that that donor realizes that, hey, these capital gains taxes, they're optional. I didn't realize that. Well, all of a sudden now, when we're looking at another sales event that's going to trigger more capital gains taxes, now charitable giving pops into mind. And who do we talk to? Oh yeah, I know somebody who's got people that hears about that. And you want to be part of that conversation.
Amen for the advisor part of it, because as we talk on a daily basis, we are informing and educating. We are informing and educating. We're not selling or convincing or pushing or pulling or persuading. This is an educational advisory position to be in. And now that we as the Real Agents of Change are doing certification for Charitable Real Estate Specialists and for Charitable Real Estate Divisions in every city of this, in every state of the country, the fact is when these real estate agents and offices and companies step into that advisory role, wow, talk about a unique sales proposition for them. Talk about winning over the business of the high net worth influential people by having a completely different way to advise clients than the typical average good agent who does a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the phrases that has been particularly attractive to people, donors in particular, when describing what it is that you do, is simply this idea that I help donors give smarter. If you communicate that I help donors give smarter, that's going to create interest. Well, what do you mean you help donors give smarter? Then you can explain some of the concepts behind giving real estate and how that is tax advantageous and the other very powerful things that can be accomplished through that process. So notice, Cammie, all of the things we're talking about here, we're talking about leading with value. And when we lead with value for the clients, both in the ways that we describe what we do and in the ways that we present those options, that gets a much more interested response from clients along the way.
Amen. So let's break it down to the most core first step. We're talking to a nonprofit and they say, love it, love the idea, what's next? And what we have been really wrestling with is so many people just want a canned response. They want a certain campaign, but a church with 100 followers in a small city versus one with 100,000 that are watching their TV show every week versus a veterans group or an animals group, large, small, big, they're all so very different. I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear you say, what is the very first thing that any of these nonprofits can do to get the ball rolling?
So, there are a number of different strategies. Certainly the idea of just incorporating into your regular communications the idea that people like you do things like this, right? Incorporating in those stories, those concepts, those ideas can be very helpful. There's lots of different ways to do this, right? We can even ask people about, what's the likelihood that you might consider making a gift of real estate in the next 6 months? And just asking that question, what does it do? It puts the idea into a person's head. Oh, well, I guess I hadn't thought about that. And even if they say, I'm not sure about that, it introduces the idea. And if we can combine that, introducing the idea with an obvious next step for the donor, which is, letting them know, let's have a conversation about this. We have experts that I can talk to and put together some proposals, some ideas for you. If the donors know that other people like me do things like this, and you can put together some ideas for me to look at, that's really the message that we want to get across. And whether we're trying to get that message across to 10 people or 100 or 10,000, I think those are the core ideas that we want to try to communicate to get the donor to act. And again, the action that we're looking for here isn't to sign on the dotted line. The action is, let's have a conversation about setting up a meeting where we could propose some ideas for you.
Great point. In talking about not trying to get people to sign on the dotted line, I have some real estate agents who say, well, what am I trying to get the nonprofit to do? And am I trying to get them to put a logo on their website? Am I trying to get them to XYZ? And I've said, oh, you're not trying to get them to do anything other than have an intelligent conversation about how they can accept non-cash assets and grow by 6 times the amount they currently do. So what can we, as the real agents of change, do for Dr. Russell James out in the marketplace? To your point, whether you want to talk to 10 or 100 or 10,000 people, we would love to put you in front of more people, whether it's speaking engagements or webinars or what have you. What can we do to help you forward your passion and movement?
Well, thanks so much. Well, so here's the reality. I'm a professor. I do research. Some of my research, for example, we've looked at over 1 million nonprofit tax returns and found just how massively powerful it is when a nonprofit begins raising contributions, including contributions from real estate, and how that predicts their long-term fundraising growth. So I'm doing all this sort of research, and fundamentally, it doesn't do anybody any good if it sits on the shelf somewhere. So anytime that I can be helpful to get the word out about how powerful this non-cash assets are, and just how that can be transformational for donors and for nonprofits, I'm happy to help any way that I can. So thanks for asking, and I'm very happy to be on this show as well, to be able to get the word out about how powerful these gifts can be.
Well, I can certainly speak from experience. When I reached out to you, you immediately were so responsive and so generous with your a whole library of videos to educate and inform, and so generous as to come on this show. And I just want to encourage my real agents of change to reach out to you. And as I'm touring the country in my RV, everyone knows me as the RV goddess with the hula hoop of happiness and heart-centered hypnotic swirling. I love to go town to town, hula hooping in my RV and just having a great time, kind of like Johnny Appleseed dropping the seed of charitable real estate, whether it's a nonprofit that wants me to share it with their group or the real estate agents that want me to share it with their group. We're just touring the country this year, just like you, letting as many people as possible know that there are options out there, and nonprofits don't have to struggle and do the typical traditional fundraisers. They can get funded, and the real estate companies can finally be the contribution that they've always wanted to be. That's what really spoke to me about this. With all my history of real estate, wow, how could the real estate companies step into being a part of the awakening? And right as we let you go today, I'm sure you've got a lot of other things to get to. What would you say to the real estate companies now that there's actually a way to get certified and learn how this works?
So Cami, a couple of different things. Number one, that's a very powerful thing to get as a certification, because it's a great conversation opener. It's a great way to establish expertise and to be able to say, I help donors give smarter. That's why I have this designation. That's why I have this certification. Very powerful. And let me also say, by the way, for any folks who are listening, if you're interested in what I call charitable financial planning, all of these sort of things and how to talk about them and what all the techniques are, let me ask one favor of you. Please just connect with me on LinkedIn. And Cami, as you know, I will send you a list that is free links to all of my books, all of my videos, all of my slide presentations, and all of that, and happy to share all of that with any folks who are interested. So feel free and do that. And if I can be helpful to you, just let me know.
Well, the way you can be helpful to us is as you are spinning your web of education and speaking to nonprofits, let them know that we are creating real agents of change in every state with real estate agents and companies who want to help them, who want to be a part of the awakening. And as a partnership, we just bring those resources and relationships together for more revenue for everyone. So Dr. Russell James, thank you so much for your time today. I'm quite certain in the next 3 months, we'd love to have you back on, because we will have formulated some even more intelligent questions for you to answer for us. And, anytime we can really raise up and acknowledge other agents of change in the world, that's what we're here for. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Cami. I appreciate you having me today.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.